All right, let's talk about the world of web development. It feels like there's a new challenger on the block every other week. But today, we're looking at a really interesting one, TanStack Start. And we're asking the big question, does it actually have what it takes to go up against the undisputed champion, Next.js?
I mean, let's be real. For the last few years, if you were building any kind of serious web app with React, the conversation pretty much started and ended with Next.js. It's powerful, it's everywhere, and it's seen as the go-to framework to get stuff into production.
But is it the only way? As the web world gets more and more mature, people are starting to ask, hey, is this massive, all-in-one approach really the best choice for every single project? It's a fair question.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at why Next.js is on top. Then we'll introduce the new kid, TanStack Start. We'll get into their totally different ways of thinking, compare them feature for feature, and then, finally, try to figure out what the verdict is.
So let's kick things off by setting the scene. Why exactly is Next.js the king of the castle right now? Well, the appeal is pretty undeniable, right? Next.js gives you everything in one box. Routing, data fetching, rendering, it's all there, ready to go from minute one. Plus, it has the huge backing of Vercel and a massive community, which means you're never more than a Google search away from an answer. But here's the thing about that batteries included approach. It's not always the perfect solution. For all that power, some developers are definitely starting to feel the weight of the choices Next.js makes for them. You see, as Next.js has gotten bigger, it's also gotten way more complex. Its architecture is really opinionated. You kind of have to do things the Next.js way. And because it's so closely tied to Vercel's hosting platform, people are getting a little worried about vendor lock-in. And well, that's the kind of opening a challenger is looking for.
And that brings us to our challenger. So let's meet TanStack Start. It's an alternative that's popping up from a corner of the dev world that a lot of people already know and trust.
So what is it? Officially, it's a type-safe, router-centric meta framework. Okay, that's a mouthful. But the keywords to focus on are router-centric, meaning the router is the star of the show, and meta framework, which is a fancy way of saying it's more like a toolkit than a strict set of rules. Now, this is the part that should really make you pay attention. It comes from Tanner Lindsley. If that name sounds familiar, it's because he's the guy behind TanStack, the home of ridiculously popular tools like React Query and React Table. So yeah, this thing has a serious pedigree. It's not just some random project. And that background leads to a totally different philosophy. And honestly, this is the most important part of this whole explainer. We're talking about a framework versus what they call an unframework. I love this analogy because it just makes everything click. Think of Next.js as one of those pre-packaged meal kits. It's super convenient, right? All the ingredients are there, the instructions are clear, but you're stuck making that one dish. TanStack Start is more like a professional chef's pantry. It's stocked with amazing, high-quality ingredients, but you're the chef. You get to decide what to make.
So what does this unframework idea actually mean when you're coding? Well, it means you get a bunch of powerful tools that aren't all tangled up with each other. You just pick and choose the parts you actually need, which usually means a smaller, leaner app. It's designed to be less opinionated, so you don't get locked into doing things just one way. Okay, so let's get down to the nitty-gritty. How do these two different philosophies actually compare when we look at the features we use every single day? This table lays it all out so well. Just look at the pattern here. For routing, Next.js has it baked right in. TanStack uses its own separate router. For data fetching, Next.js is all about their built-in server components, while TanStack basically says, hey, bring whatever you want, like TanStack Query. See? It's integrated and opinionated versus decoupled and flexible, all the way down. Let's dig into that routing piece for a second. With Next.js, your file structure is your routing. Simple as that. It's automatic, but it's also a very rigid rule. With TanStack Start, the router is its own standalone library. It's so separate you could actually use it in a completely different project if you wanted to. That's a massive difference in how you think about building your app.
And you see the exact same story with data fetching. Next.js is going all in on React Server Components, which is this huge, deeply integrated new paradigm. TanStack Start kind of takes a step back and says, you know what's great for data fetching? A great data fetching library. It lets you use something like their own TanStack Query, which means you stay in complete control of your caching and your state.
So, after all of that, what's the verdict? How do you choose? Which one is actually the right tool for the job? Well, TanStack Start is going to be a dream come true for a certain type of developer. If you're someone who wants total control over every piece of your tech stack, if you're nervous about getting locked into one company's ecosystem, or if you're just building something that doesn't need all the heavy machinery of a giant framework, then you should absolutely be giving TanStack Start a serious look.
Look, at the end of the day, it all boils down to this one classic trade-off. Next.js gives you incredible development speed by following its conventions. It makes a lot of decisions for you. TanStack Start, on the other hand, gives you ultimate flexibility and control, but that means you have to be the one to make those decisions.
But, this whole comparison is about more than just picking your next tool. It really gets to the heart of a much bigger conversation that's happening in web development right now.
And that leaves us with this final, massive question to chew on. What does the future of web development look like? Is it going to be dominated by these huge, all-in-one integrated frameworks that try to solve every problem for us? Or are we going to see a swing back towards these flexible mix-and-match toolkits that put the power and the choice back in the hands of the developer? The fact that TanStack Start even exists proves this debate is just getting started.